What you see in this clip is ICE having shot a 21-year-old protester in his eyes and then dragging him off with his face covered in blood. It's been confirmed just about an hour ago that this 21-year-old has lost his vision and is now permanently blind. ICE is officially out of control in Minnesota. We saw ICE kneel on a pregnant woman, then drag her through the snow, and it was confirmed that she lost her baby while being held in detention center. We saw a young woman in Minnesota just a few days ago, shot in the face 3 times, ended up dying, and the ICE agent fled the scene. We've seen a 21-year-old now be shot in the face and now permanently blind. We're seeing horrific story after horrific story. Public schools in Minnesota are now closed due to ICE because it's not safe. ICE is not fighting crime. ICE is the crime. You dressed criminals in camouflage and gave them automatic assault weapons to terrorize blue states and anybody who's brown or protesting. But what this maniac in office doesn't realize is that there's Republicans, Democrats, Independents, and MAGA in these blue states that are all now coming together because we realize this is wrong, and we're ready to fight back.
And it is the closest graphic example I've seen of a police state going on in Minneapolis than I've seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, I've not seen this in my lifetime. I don't think anybody's seen it in their lifetime. And, you know, I think somebody in the White House, several people in the White House, Kristi Noem, think they're acting tough. They're going to show people who are tough. No, well, they're just showing people how stupid they are, how thuggish they are. The poll numbers are collapsing. The poll numbers just keep collapsing. And as they collapse, Mika, the more they collapse, the more brutish, the more terrible, the more unpopular the behavior comes, where you have Joe Rogan on radio yesterday talking about these Gestapo-like tactics. Joe Rogan saying that and talking about, again, the masks. It's just, people get dragged out of their cars, thrown onto the streets, and these ICE officers really, they don't believe that Americans have rights the way they're behaving. 40% of Americans approve of ICE tactics. That's the highest number I've seen. 57% disapprove. And the disapproval numbers just keep going up.
Things seem to really ramp up on the ground in Minnesota yesterday, and we're going to show you more of what we're seeing out of that state in just a moment. Plus, we'll go through President Trump's speech yesterday in Detroit that was filled with false claims about the state of the economy, also in an interview he did. The president, meanwhile, again suggesting U.S. intervention in Iran amid massive protests there. We'll show you what he said about sending troops to the Middle East. And on Capitol Hill, the Republican-led House Oversight Committee says it will hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress after they refused to testify about Jeffrey Epstein, a move that can't apply to President Trump, according to Chairman James Comer.
A remarkable letter from Bill and Hillary Clinton, which we'll get into later in the show.
With us this hour, co-host of our 9 a.m. hour, staff writer at The Atlantic, Jonathan Lemire, and opinion columnist for The New York Times, David French, is with us. So more now on the situation out of Minnesota. The Justice Department says there is no basis for a civil rights investigation into the deadly ICE shooting of Renee Nicole Good. The feds argue the officer who shot her acted in self-defense. This comes as frustration grows in Minneapolis, where ICE and Border Patrol agents are using aggressive tactics to arrest people. MS Now reporter Britt Miller talked with a local political leader who says he fears for his life.
In a network exclusive, we're hearing about the terrifying moments when Minneapolis City Council President Elliot Payne says he was assaulted by an ICE agent. Payne says it happened Monday night after he went to check on a U.S. citizen being harassed by federal agents.
I introduced myself as council president. I asked the name and badge number of the officer. They refused to provide that information, and they were pointing tasers at us indiscriminately. And then another agent came up from behind me and shoved me aside.
Seconds later, another person is pushed. This is just one of the countless videos showing how the streets of Minneapolis have descended into chaos after an ICE agent killed 37-year-old Renee Good, shooting her in the head.
It feels like a military occupation. It feels like we're under assault by our federal government.
At a gas station, agents walk up to a parked car asking the driver for status.
Trying to get status, got Honduran air.
When suddenly the masked men smash his car window and drag him to the ground.
There's a lot of direct assault, and particularly how they're roughing up U.S. citizens who are just legal observers. They will tackle them. One of my constituents had their hand broken as they were apprehended, and they will just dump people off without medical care after essentially torturing them. And this is the most un-American thing I can imagine.
ICE agents started showing up in Minneapolis late last year for Operation Metro Surge, with reports of more than 2,000 arrests so far. But according to a new Quinnipiac poll, 57% of registered voters disapprove of the way ICE is enforcing immigration laws. 40% approve. Podcaster Joe Rogan joining the conversation with criticism.
And then I can also see the point of view of the people that say, yeah, but you don't want militarized people in the streets just roaming around, snatching people up, many of which turn out to actually be U.S. citizens that just don't have their papers on them. Are we really going to be the Gestapo? Where's your papers? Is that what we've come to?
But the Trump administration has argued community members are the aggressors disrupting immigration operations.
I have not seen residents of Minneapolis being violent with law enforcement agents. I've only seen law enforcement agents being violent with the residents of Minneapolis. They are the aggressors, they are the instigators, and they are the escalators.
Payne says in the face of anger and fear, the community is practicing de-escalation and exercising their right to demonstrate. And with President Trump promising a day of reckoning and retribution in Minnesota, there's concern about what's next.
Are you worried that what happened to Renee Good could happen again, that another federal agent could kill somebody?
Yeah, I'm worried that they'll kill me because I'm out there and I'm witnessing and I'm documenting, and it seems that they are retaliating against us for asserting our rights.
And as clashes continue, activists have announced a day of action on January 23rd, asking people not to shop, not to go to work or even go to school, but to march peacefully through Minneapolis instead. Meanwhile, we've reached out to DHS about those videos you just saw. We have yet to hear back. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Britt. So, David French, you have the Justice Department covering up the killing of Renee Good, no investigation, despite the fact you have an ICE agent shooting at point-blank range from the side of the car straight into her window. It looked like it was pointed directly at her head. I don't know in what universe that wouldn't cause law enforcement officers to investigate that shooting. But here, the Justice Department, the White House, desperate to cover that investigation up and kill it. And then finally, I'm just curious, as a constitutional lawyer, I mean, I see these people being dragged in the street. I see masked people coming up, demanding papers. I see a guy sitting in a gas station parking lot, and ICE officers breaking the window and then dragging him out and putting their knee on his back. We went to law school. We practiced law. This looks like Russia. It really does. This looks like something that you would expect in Russia. That protesters. This is happening to protesters, not suspected murderers or rapists. This is what America looks like in 2025 for protesters. We always looked at what happened to the Soviet Union and looked at what happened in Putin's Russia and saw this happening to protesters there being taken off the streets, thinking, my God, how could that ever happen in society? And I'd always ask, How could those Russian police officers do that? Well, we've got people lined up for this job to put masks on, to go in, to break people's windows, drag them out of their cars, beat up American citizens, shove them to the ground, and then cuff them. Help me understand, David, how we got here so fast.
Yeah, I think it's plain that we got here so fast because Donald Trump and Stephen Miller came into office deciding that they were going to move very fast and in a very brutal way. You know, and you mentioned the Constitution, Joe. I think it is starting to sink in at all levels of the federal judiciary that a couple of things. One, that the Trump administration is not being honest with them. Yeah, there was a more than 200-page legal opinion coming out of Trump's deployment of the National Guard to Chicago and talking about the ICE tactics in Chicago that demonstrated all of the ways in which the administration had lied to judges, lied to the court about its actions. It's sinking in that they're not being honest with them, and it's also sinking within to the courts the way in which the Trump administration is systematically violating the Constitution. I think it is very telling that in the Trump v. Illinois opinion from the Supreme Court very recently that upheld an order blocking deployment of the National Guard, that Justice Kavanaugh very clearly said you can't stop people on the basis of race alone. Yet this seems to be happening across the United States. And Joe, you put up those poll numbers, and I think what's particularly notable about those numbers, it was, I believe, 57-40, with 57% against tactics. We need to remember this is a core area of Trump. This was one of Trump's best issues when he was elected. He was elected in part to engineer an immigration crackdown. This was part of the reason why Americans voted for him, a big part of the reason, and he has squandered that goodwill in a core area for him. And this is the record that Republicans are going to be running on this year in the midterms. It's a question that was initially strongly Republican, now tilting against them because people are looking at this and having the same reaction you and I have. This isn't what we want America to look like.
This is not what America is supposed to look like. And Willie, those numbers actually are misleading in that you're seeing a lot of Republicans prop up, blindly supporting Donald Trump, prop up those numbers even to 40%. Every one of these polls show independents, the people who will decide who controls Congress for the next several years, are markedly against this sort of behavior. I mean, you even have some polls showing over 40% of people want ICE now to be abolished. But you look at that independent vote, the people who are going to make a difference in the next election, those numbers have cratered. It's also new polls have come out about whether the officer was justified in the killing. And there you see, would you support abolishing ICE? 46% would support that. And again, as we said yesterday, ICE's approval numbers have gone down 30 percentage points since Kristi Noem took over the agency back in February. But Willie, polls came out yesterday about whether the officer was justified in killing Renee Good, of course, shooting twice at point-blank range into the side of her car. Quinnipiac, 28%, only 28% support. YouGov, only 35% think he was justified. Data for Progress, 36%. So these Republicans who live in a bubble, these MAGA supporters who live in a bubble and think that America is with them, no, America's not with them. America is horrified by what's been going on.
Yeah, and with every video every morning that we show here and we watch in horror often of a masked man dressed in military fatigues in the streets of an American city, breaking a window and dragging someone out, or dragging U.S. citizens out of a Target, or now, as the New York Times reports, targeting refugees who are here legally, who've been screened through all the security protocols, and that is not an easy process to get to America that way. They are also being arrested by ICE now for the crime of being Somali in Minneapolis. Every time we see these videos, those numbers that you talked about go down in support of ICE. And John Lemire, Not long ago, abolish ICE was an extreme left-wing position, and now you see 46% of Americans supporting that, because if the mission for ICE was, as President Trump promised, to go and get rapists and murderers out of this country, hard to find anybody who would object to that. But that clearly now is not the mission. As Joe Rogan and many other Trump supporters themselves have said, this is not what we voted for, these scenes we're watching this morning.
Yet, at least for now, the White House doesn't care. Those scenes are difficult to watch. That woman being pulled from her car, the glass shattered, and that guy sitting in the gas station. And then we hear the agents, the ICE agent, the Border Patrol agent saying, oh, we've got a Honduran here. Yeah. What is this? Like, this is not the America that many of us thought we were living in. But it is Donald Trump's America. It is Stephen Miller's America. And there was a moment last week, President Trump sat for a 2-hour interview with the New York Times. And it was in the aftermath of this moment. And the reporters there actually wanted to ask him about the shooting. His aide brought over the video on a laptop. He initially defended it, saying, oh, look, she struck him with a car. But as subsequent viewing showed, well, actually, she didn't. He kind of backed off. He's like, well, I'm not really sure what happened here. And that moment of sort of humanity, because he did say, like, well, I feel terrible about what happened, gone quickly. By that night, by the next day, he has doubled, he has tripled down. They have used this shooting in Minneapolis as an excuse to surge far more officers there. We've heard local officials say it's like an occupying force there in the Twin Cities. We have seen them suggesting that other cities might be next with enforced ICE agents, including potentially New York. And yet, people I talk to in the White House say there's no plan here. They see some of them see the polls. The political operation has expressed some private concerns, Mika, but right now there's been no plan to deviate course right now. Miller and Noem are empowered. The president has given his blessing.
Well, they're going to take it right to the ground then. They're taking it right to the ground because those poll numbers are going to keep collapsing. And the support, especially among independents, going to keep collapsing, not only for ICE, but also for Donald Trump and for the administration. This is a losing course. It's un-American. It's a losing course, and you're going to be boiled down to that 31, 32, 33% that, I don't know, defended Cali after My Lai, that defended the soldiers at Abu Ghraib. There's always the 33%. And then what follows? A massive landslide against the president, who is supporting this, or against the president's party. So I am hoping that this president understands that Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem have him on a losing course. I am hoping he looks at the poll numbers, and I'm hoping Republicans look at the poll numbers and see that since Kristi Noem took over ICE, approval for ICE has gone down 30 percentage points. ICE used to have a favorable approval rating. Now, a 30% swing. And on top of that, you now have 46% of Americans saying they want to abolish ICE. This gets worse by the day. It doesn't get better. It doesn't get better. This has to stop.